John Cox is not going to be on the Elite Series very much longer, and he's likely to get dropped this year, maybe the next year, but pretty soon he's going to be dropped. Maybe that's a harsh intro. John Cox is better than you. He's better than all of us. But what he's chosen to do in the past couple of years, and what I think he's going to continue to choose to do, is choose to fish his strengths, fish how he thinks is fun. And for a long time, that was, if you were good enough or your strengths were the right strengths, that was good enough to keep you on the Elite Series and be successful like he has been in the past. And his strengths are being a shallow water fisherman. Now, I'm happy for him. He's amazing at it. Like Keith Boucher, Greg Hackney, John Cox is one of the best fishermen in the country. I'm positive. But his strengths are going away from the norm. You've seen all the forward-facing sonar stuff. The game is changing. If he doesn't change with it, he's going to be out. And he may be happy with that, or he may be sticking around trying to prove a point that you don't have to convert. You can still hammer out these wins or these Angler of the Year points. But I'm going to show you today by the numbers why that's just not feasible in today's game. And so we're going to start out watching a little snippet of a video of him. We'll go into some Bassmaster stuff about his bio and his plan last year that kind of worked. It didn't get him any wins, but it kind of worked. And given the explosion of forward-facing sonar this season, we're only 2 tournaments in, but it's going to continue. I'll be interested to see how this video ages over time, but it's going to continue. We'll go over by the numbers his previous 3 seasons in the Elite Series, how he stacked up, and then given these last 2 tournaments, what the future is going to hold for John Cox. So let's get into it.
We got something special for you today. We're going to go shallow water fishing. I mean, this is pretty much how I've made my living the last 20 years or so, is just fishing shallow. It's kind of crazy at all. You know, I grew up fishing shallow constantly, fishing John boat tournaments and stuff. And, you know, when I got into the big tournaments, the whole side scan thing and all that stuff, I got all the electronics on. I did horrible, finished like dead last a couple events. And from that time on, I kind of, you know, learned that, you know, I'm just going to go shallow every time. And try to make it work. And of course, we're going to have a few bad tournaments, but you know, if we get dialed in on that shallow water game, you know, maybe we can be successful more than not.
So he said you could have a couple bad tournaments. Of course, if you go out and throw the Texas rig brush hog every single tournament, eventually you're going to run into them. You'll blow everybody out of the water, but you need to be able to adapt to stay at the top of the game, the Elite Series. And the guys who have adapted and moved to forward-facing sonar, finding individual large fish offshore, and even last week at Lake Fork, John Cox was there. We're going to go over his numbers. There were spawning fish. There were fish that were spawning and barely pulled out, still on the way back to the pockets, but barely pulled out. And the guys on their forward-facing sonar were sniping those fish individually, catching giant bags of fish, and the sight fishing game was not going to do it. And that's, he just didn't, John Cox didn't go that route. I think he's still staying away from it, and he's paying for it. So let's get into right here. Here's John Cox's profile on Bassmaster. And in his bio, what stands out to me, signature technique and strength. I like to be able to touch the bottom where I'm fishing. He likes to fish, I believe he said 4 feet or less constantly, year round. That's what he prefers. And he enjoys it. He's, like I said, he's one of the best, if not the best in the country at it. But given the technology and how new anglers are fishing, and even older anglers are adapting to fish at that level, not working anymore. It's not competing anymore. It's working for him. He's still performing as he has. It just doesn't keep up with the size of the bags coming in anymore. Here's him, John Cox, reflecting on the 2023 season. Right here. My forward-facing sonar rode with me in the truck all year. When I got to Champlain, I knew it was going to be dominated by it, but I enjoy fishing Champlain, catching largemouth and smallmouth shallow. He knows. He's smart. He's good. He knows. But he enjoys fishing shallow. He left it in the truck. Down here, it might have been my worst finish all year, but it reminded me of when I was a kid growing up there and watching Denny Brower win. I just don't want to lose that. The season was going so well to that point that I didn't want to do stuff that I don't love doing, so I didn't put forward-facing sonar on my boat. That he's just like I said, I'm happy for him. He's doing what he enjoys, he's doing what he loves, but it's gonna get him off the elite tour. And if he's happy with that, going back to the opens or something like that, then more power to him. But nowadays, as you've all seen, if you're not engaged and focusing on forward-facing sonar, you can't keep up. It's just impossible to keep up with the technology now. If you're not using it, capitalizing on it. Like he said in that previous video, parts of me wants to put the forward-facing sonar on and try to do it. But even when SideScan came out, that was my worst season, I think. So yeah, I'm sure he's better at forward-facing sonar than me and all of you watching. But still not to the same level as the guys who are just hammering it, or the young guys who grew up on it, and that's what they're fishing, that's what they know. So if you're not all in on it, it's not going to help you as much. Focus on your strengths, but like I said, if your strengths don't line up, you're just going to get lucky in a couple tournaments, or maybe not lucky, but your technique is going to be the deal in a couple tournaments, and you are going to get blasted in the rest of them. For him qualifying, so these are the qualifications needed for the 2024 season. And this is most likely rolling over in the 2025. You have to be in the top 70 AOI standings in the field to move on and remain in the elites. Now, John Cox will have a little bit of a chance, if he's not, to stay in right here. Remainder is filled through lifetime AOI average, which he has a good average. He's done well over the last 3 years. And we'll go over those numbers here in a second. But he's likely going to fall out of that top 70, out of the total, I think it's 80 with a goal of 100. But out of that top 70, I think he's going to fall out of that this season and then be hoping for a spot. And back to the opens is likely. So I'll bring up my fancy spreadsheet that I made. We'll start over here on the left. This is 2020. This is John Cox's results for each tournament in 2020. We have this line here, this highlighted line across is April. So all the tournaments above are prior to April. All the tournaments below are after April. So pay attention to the greens. These are his top 10 finishes in 2020, 2021, and 2022. He had 2 late season top 10s in 2020. His total average weight per tournament in 2020 was 39.94 pounds. And his average place in a tournament for 2020 was 30th place. He was 17th in the AOI. And then moving into 2021, he had 1 top 10 finish early on in the year prior to April. And then his average weight per tournament was 30 pounds. His average place was 45 or 45th. So 45th in the AOI standings. It was a bad year for him. It was his worst year in the late series going forward. And then dates, 2022 season. He's got 4 top 10s, 3 of them being April earlier, 1 being after April, late in the season, and averages almost 50 pounds per tournament, and 31st place finishing. 8th in the AOI. And then here I have a note down here, 6. So I'm calling out his top 10s and where they are during the year, because that pre-spawn to spawn time April and beyond, April and earlier, is his strength, that shallow water fishing, right? So 6 of 9 top 10s that he's had in the Elite Series are before April. Now it's going to come into play with the last 2 tournaments of this season, and his average AOI standing over his season so far is 20th. So he's amazing. He's up there year after year, averaging 20th in the AOI on the Elite Series. Very, very good. Moving on to 2023. His 2 top 10s were April or earlier. 12th in the AOI, averaging 44.25 pounds per tournament, averaging 31st place throughout the season. Let's go over to 2024. He averages, there's only 2 tournaments, but he's averaging 33.75 pounds per tournament. His average place is 63.5. This is far and above his worst average for his first 2 tournaments of an Elite Series season. And it's not so much that his weight fell off. He's still getting mid-30s. He had a couple other seasons where his totals were high in those first 2 tournaments. But his weight didn't fall off so much. It's that the competition is higher. The bags are bigger. He's doing what he does and has done well and not keeping up. So currently he's 69th in AOI standings for 2024. And then over here, I've got the weight that it took to win each tournament. Total weight for first place in 2020 all the way through 2024. So we're going to look at these averages. In 2020, it took on an average a little over 75 pounds to win each time on the Elite Series. 75 pounds again for 2021. 82 pounds for 2022. Forward-facing sonar is coming in a little hotter. 79 pounds for 2023. And the first 2 tournaments of 2024, an average of 115 pounds to win it. John Cox is not getting worse. I'm sure he's better than he's ever been. A little dip in his performance, you could argue that for this first 2 tournaments. But even if he was on par, which is not much better than he did, even if he was on par, there's no shot. There's absolutely no shot. 115 pounds on average over these first 2 tournaments. The bags this season on the Elite Series are going to be astronomical. And if you're not playing the game like it's being played now, you don't have a chance. So as good as you can be, one of the best in the nation at techniques that used to work in the past, it's in the past. It's not happening anymore. If you're wondering what all these percentages are, I have spattered through my nice Excel spreadsheet. These are what I think the percentages that I'm going to rewrite, and it's pretty darn accurate. No. These are the percentages of you who aren't subscribed, 95.3%. So let's move on from there. John Cox is, like, I don't want to make this like a digging video, right? It's not a dig at him. He's not one of the old guys. He's been around quite a while, but only his 4th season on the Elite Series. It's adapt or die. They have no chance to compete, to keep up, and they can. He's either doing what he loves, his fishing, his strengths, or he's trying to prove a point that you can beat him still. You can beat those young guys, those guys who have adapted to the new technology, and neither of those 2 things are going to keep you on the Elite Series at that top level, barring any changes. So I'd be very interested to see how he ends up this season. I'll be watching. I'm going to say now he's going to be below 70th in the AOI standings. He's going to be at the bottom, and that's unfortunate because he's one of my favorite guys to watch. Him, like I said, Keith Boucher, Greg Hackney, those guys are entertaining to watch. They're so skillful, but it's just not going to be competitive at that level anymore. So I'll be interested to see how this video ages. Like I said, hopefully it ages well. And that's all I got to say. Thanks for watching.